This conference will now be recorded.
There we go. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the monthly meeting of the Engineering and Operations Committee and also special meeting of the Board of Directors. And Mr. General Manager, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do for the committee.
Okay, any public comment?
I have not received any requests for public comment, Director Alvarez.
How about presentations today?
Likewise, we do not have any presentations.
Okay, then we're on to the action calendar. And the first item up is the award of agreement for the operation and maintenance of the recycled water distribution system. So Mr. General Manager, take that one away.
All right, thank you again, Chair Alvarez, and members of the board, members of the public, and staff. We have 3 action items today on the action calendar. The first one, as you mentioned, Chairman Alvarez, is regarding the award of agreement for the operation and maintenance of the recycled water distribution system. As you know, Cal Water is the current operator of that system, and their contract expires, I believe, on June 30th, 2021. And as directed by the board, we sent this out to, agreement or contract out to bid and received 2 bids, and the staff performed interviews and have a recommendation for the committee today. So we have our operations supervisor, where is Frank? There you are, Frank Fuchs, and Frank is going to handle this item. There's no presentation per se, but he's going to walk us through how we got to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, directors. Yes, as Patrick mentioned, the district currently has an agreement with California Water Service Company to operate and maintain the recycled water distribution system, and the current agreement expires June 30th of this year. The distribution system consists of 103 miles of pipelines with pertinent facilities, which include system valves, air vacuum valves, blow-offs, and it also includes booster pump stations and 3 disinfection stations. And again, as Patrick mentioned, West Basin has subcontracted this work for the operation and maintenance for the distribution system since the inception of the recycled water program. The operations and maintenance also includes responding to emergency repairs as needed and being available 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. Again, the board directed staff to issue a request for proposals for this work beyond the current contract term. And as a result, staff issued an RFP on March 26th of this year. 2 proposals were received on April 23rd, one from Suez, another from Inframark. And the proposals were evaluated by 3 West Basin staff members, as well as a third-party evaluator. Both responding firms were interviewed by the 4-member panel on May 4th, and a summary of the evaluation scores is provided there on table 1, found on page 4 of the board packet. Inframark scored a total of 77.2 points out of 107 available points. That was one point higher than Suez. If I can direct your attention in the table under the evaluation criteria, I wanted to go through some of the main points or the main differences between the 2 proposals. So first, under qualifications, capabilities, and experience, both teams have experience managing and operating distribution systems. However, the evaluation team found that Inframark just has more experience in staff locally. You can see that Inframark scored higher in this area. Inframark currently manages distribution systems in Central Basin Municipal Water District, which is also a recycled water distribution system. They also manage the City of Huntington Park potable water distribution system, as well as a potable water distribution system in Paris, California. And this is beneficial because first they have experience with California laws and regulations, and they have staff that are currently working on those systems that they can get local support from distribution operators as needed. Suez, of course, is a very capable company. There are partners at our treatment plants. However, their experience in managing distribution systems is mainly on the East Coast. They did propose to have corporate staff support for a transition for training new operators, but again, they didn't have local experience. As I mentioned, there's a benefit of having local operations such as what Infomark has to provide backup support if needed. And then secondly, under key personnel in the same table, Infomark identified operations staff that would be assigned to work on the West Basin distribution system from the start of the agreement. So they would be able to start on July 1st. For example, during the interview, Infomark had two of their operations team, two of the operators that would be implementing the work available in the interview. Suez has a project manager available, but they indicated that they were undergoing a process to hire operators. So just overall, for that section, Infomark also, they had a better staffing and backup plan available. Both firms did submit value-added items. For example, both included implementing an asset management program for the distribution system. This is something that is not currently included with the current agreement with Cal Water. And so overall, for the technical approach and methodology, they scored very close, and actually Suez scored a little bit better in that section. But the other main difference in the evaluation was the pricing. And I do want to point out that this contract will be a time and materials agreement. So the services needed will vary per month. So it makes sense to pay based on what is needed instead of an overall set fee. And so what we requested from the vendors was that they provide their fee schedule, which is a breakdown of their labor rates, their fees, their markups on materials and subcontractors. And this is what essentially we would base our agreement or our pricing on. And so the actual cost will vary based on the number of hours or what is charged. Since Infomark had the highest overall score, staff did reach out to negotiate rates and markups. And so a summary of the final rates for the main labor positions, along with the markups of the two vendors, is shown on table 2 on page 5 of the board packet for comparison. And the labor rates and markup for Suez are lower than Infomark, which is also reflected in the scoring. There are other fees associated, but the labor fees make up the bulk of the cost, so we wanted to show this summary for comparison. In addition to the rates, the fees, and the markup submitted, vendors were also asked to submit budget estimates of basic services in several scenarios, which is also summarized in table 3 of page 6 on the board packet. You can please scroll down to there, thank you. So the first column of the table shows the basic services. So this includes tasks needed for the operation and maintenance of the distribution system without any repairs. So it includes tasks such as, for example, water quality sampling and valve exercising, implementing the operation and maintenance of the pump and the disinfection station. And it also includes responding to underground service alerts, which also varies per month. And then the second column shows the estimates for repairs, which include both non-emergency and emergency repairs, such as leaks. And so for the repairs, what we did was we provided several scenarios, several repair scenarios, and we asked the vendors to put together the estimates based on those different scenarios. The budget estimates developed were not quotes. I just want to clarify that. These were used to, the intent was to be able to evaluate vendor knowledge of the work, compare costs between vendors, and ultimately develop an overall budget. And so again, just going back to table 3, the budget estimate in basic services is lower for Suez due to the lower labor rates and markups compared to Infomark. I do want to mention that Suez did not include costs associated with a project manager, since they proposed to have the treatment plant project manager also manage the distribution system. And although this is a cost saving measure, the evaluation team believed that they should have identified hours needed for this position. There was just some concern if the treatment plant project manager would be able to dedicate sufficient time directly to oversee the distribution system operations. For the repairs, both vendors proposed to use the same pipeline contractor for the same repairs, the same scenarios that were provided. Again, the repair budget using SUEZ estimates was lower, but it was lower than what we would expect for these types of repairs. The repair budget cost developed by Inframark was more in line with what we would expect based on past work. And so it also reflected their knowledge of working on those types of repairs. Overall, the evaluation team believed that Inframark is better suited to implement the distribution operations and maintenance of the distribution system. Inframark had better distribution experience locally. They had a better staffing plan to be able to start work on July 1st. But it was also because they have other projects locally that they would be able to have backup resources to be able to serve West Basin. Based on the budget estimates developed by Inframark, staff recommends an overall yearly budget for basic services and potential repairs of $800,000 per year, with a 10% contingency of $80,000 per year, for a total annual budget of $880,000 per year. Therefore, staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Inframark for a 3-year term, with an option to extend the agreement for an additional 2 years. And so what staff would be able to do is that essentially at the 2-year mark, staff would make a recommendation to the board whether we would recommend to either extend the agreement or go out to submit another request for proposals to go through the procurement process again. The overall budget would be for $2,400,000 with a 10% contingency of $240,000 for a not to exceed contract amount of $2,640,000. So now I'll read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Inframark LLC for the operations and maintenance of the recycled water distribution system for a 3-year term, with an option to extend the agreement for an additional 2 years with board approval in the amount of $2,400,000 plus a 10% contingency of $240,000 for not to exceed contract amount of $2,640,000. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Director Alvarez, I would just like to know from staff, what do their let's say the contractors references say about them?
Oh, the references about Inframark. Yeah, we heard back from 2 references, one from Central Basin Municipal Water District and one from the city of Huntington Park, and they had very good feedback. They both essentially said that they highly recommended them.
Yeah, it's Huntington Park. Are they a member of Central Basin's distribution area or service area?
I'm not certain, Director. I'll have to check up on that.
Director Williams, Huntington Park is in Central Basin.
That's what I thought. Yeah, okay. So the other question I have is, did we receive any protests of this bid? Anyone lodge a protest?
Well, no, this is we haven't heard anything at this point.
So no news is good news. And what about how are they going to handle their traffic control?
Pardon me, how are they going to handle the traffic control?
Yeah.
Right, that would be subcontracted. Essentially, if it's an emergency repair, Inframark would utilize Doty Brothers to implement any traffic control needed for any types of repairs.
or Doty brothers, they're always in the right spot, the right time. And obviously you feel that this is a fair price for what we're getting here.
We do, Director Williams. So just for comparison purposes, I do want to mention that the labor rates proposed by Infomark just very roughly are about 10% less than the Cal Water labor rates. But just based on the overall budget cost that they developed, we feel that it is a fair cost.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
Any other questions from any of the board members? Okay, the way that the proposal, request for proposal was issued was based that the proposals were all supposed to be cost plus. There were no components of it that were just a fixed price or 100% cost plus.
Correct. It was all cost plus, as you described it.
Okay, and is there a minimum monthly maintenance cost?
There is no minimum service fee or readiness to serve fee for this. That was something that is part of the Cal Water agreement, but that is not part of this. That's not what Infomark proposed.
Okay, and they're proposing that all of the major physical work that they have to do, such as repair broken pipeline work, etc., will be done by Doty Brothers. Do they have an alternate, or it's just Doty Brothers?
For emergency repairs, that's who they have selected, Director. So we're essentially, they have to follow our procurement guidelines. So if there's any non-emergency repairs, so if there's some repair, for example, that we outlined here in the board memo, for example, if they needed to change an angle stop, and that's not an emergency repair, and it's anything between $10,000 and $35,000, we're requiring them to get three quotes. But if it's an emergency repair, then they are proposing to use Doty Brothers.
Okay, only for the emergency.
Correct.
All right. Okay, well, thank you very much for that clarification. Is there anything else anybody wants to mention? Director Deere, I think you're trying to talk, but we can't hear you. You gotta unmute.
Is
There
that
you go.
better?
Yes.
Thank you. Are all these people who are going to be working on this pipeline, on these pipelines are maintaining it and so on, are they all union labor?
No, that's a good question, Director Deere. Well, I'll have to confirm with Infomark, but they're proposing to not have prevailing wages on the work that the operators will implement. However, for the work that requires repairs, so for example, any leak repairs or emergency situations, that would be prevailing wage. And Doty Brothers, I believe, is a union shop, so all of that is prevailing wage, but so it's essentially a subcontractor work with Doty Brothers would be union. But I have to confirm that. I don't believe Infomark is union, but that is something that I have to confirm, Director Deere.
Thank you.
As in a follow-up to that, Director Alvarez, what about PLA? Is that are they affected by our PLA?
Frank, I can take that.
Okay.
The PLA, the Project Labor Agreement, Director Williams, that agreement specified only specific projects, specific West Basin projects, such as the Phase 2 expansion and other projects that we've done in the past, the Hyperion Pump Station, the Visitor Center, if you will. This particular contract is not part of the Project Labor Agreement.
All right. Well, thank you. If there are no further questions, I would move this to the full board.
Board, okay. With that, we'll move this to the full board at the next board meeting. All right, next item up is the agreement for award of microbiological compliance laboratory contract services. So who's gonna be making that presentation, Mr. General Manager?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Alvarez. Yeah, so there's certain things that we don't do in-house when it comes to laboratory service, particularly microbiological laboratory services. We contract that out. So this is a case where we bid it out, and I think we received one bidder who amazingly ranked #1. But we can have that all explained to you by Jamie Burkhardt, our Water Quality and Environmental Compliance Analyst 1. Jamie, there you are.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Patrick.
Jamie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and members of the board. I'm here today to present the action item on page 25 of your packets. Just to give a little bit of background, West Basin owns treatment facilities and a distribution system in southern Los Angeles County that treats and distributes recycled water under permit for non-potable uses, including irrigation, industrial processes, and the seawater barrier. Permits issued by LA Regional Water Quality Control Board require routine sampling of these facilities to ensure compliance with federal, state, and local requirements in addition to permit limits. Both the barrier product water and the Title 22 disinfected tertiary require daily grab samples of total coliforms in order to prove that the recycled water produced has been adequately disinfected. 11 groundwater monitoring wells are also required to be sampled for total coliforms on a quarterly basis. Beyond these regulatory requirements, process control sampling is performed to ensure West Basin produces high-quality recycled water. These analytical, courier, and reporting services are currently provided by Michelson Laboratories. The current contract with Michelson will expire on June 30th, 2021. A request for proposals was released to Negometrics on April 1st, 2021. Approximately 250 organizations received this RFP notice. 7 accessed the invitation, and ultimately 1 submitted a proposal by the deadline on April 30th. 3 people evaluated this proposal, including an outside evaluator from the West Basin Water Quality Laboratory, staffed by Suez. A summary of the final evaluation score and ranking is provided in Table A. The Michelson cost breakdown is provided in Attachment 1, which is shown on page 27 of your packets. Michelson received the highest score upon the conclusion of the evaluation process. The accreditation status, methodology, and staff qualifications show their commitment to producing high-quality data. Their affordable pricing and daily courier service demonstrate the value that this lab brings to its customers. I will now read the recommendation. That the board authorize the general manager to enter into an agreement with Michelson Laboratories, Inc. for the sampling, microbiological analysis, courier, and reporting services for a period of 3 years in the amount of $142,655 plus a 10% contingency for a total not to exceed amount of $156,920.50. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee member?
None for me, thank you.
Any other board members have any questions? Okay.
None.
Oh, go ahead, Director Deere.
I just want to say none. Thank you.
Okay. I have one question. We only received on this one proposal from Labs for.
That's correct.
Did anybody else call or even express any interest?
We had, before the proposal was released to the Negometrics new procurement site, we did reach out to other laboratories not only to tell them that we would be doing an RFP process, but also to tell them that we were switching to the new software and that they needed to register on that new software in order to bid on the project. And ultimately, we have been told by other agencies after the fact that this is something that not a lot of other labs want to bid on because they don't see it as a good cost benefit for them, because the time that they put into doing the proposal, Michelson, they just can't beat the prices of Michelson, in addition to having their own courier service. And so I think essentially what happens is that because of those two reasons, the price and the courier service, no one else even wants to bother to bid.
Okay. Thank you very much for the explanation.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I ask one last question?
Yes, you may.
And again, a great report. Just what about the references of these people? Do we check their references? I mean, they
I
seem
did
like
actually. I made a. I'm sorry.
Did you check their references?
I did. I called 3 different agencies and they all had great things to say about them and have actually continued to use them for probably over 10 years on average. I think they're a long-standing customers for all 3 of the references that I reached out to.
Okay, very good. It seems like our system for marketing our work is you can't say someone cheated when you send it out to the world. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If there are none, Director Williams, is it okay if we move this one forward to the full board?
I concur, yes.
Okay, we will do that. Then moving on to our next item, which is the award of professional engineering services contract for Title 22 product water pumps and VFD's projects.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Alvarez. This is our last item on the action calendar today. And this is, as you pointed out, a professional services services contract for the Title 22 product water pumps and VFD. So basically, a lot of our pumps and motors are equipped with VFDs, or variable frequency drives, that allows them to operate more efficiently, energy-wise, and more effectively and more reliably. And we have a lot of them throughout our whole system. But one key area that Joel is going to come on here and explain is the Title 22 product water pumps. So that's the big reservoirs of recycled water at the Ed C. Little plant, that atop which sits the product water pump station with massive pumps that pump out into the whole 100 miles of distribution system. And several of those pumps, not all of them have VFDs, but we're looking to have those replaced, and also some condition assessment and evaluations and some engineering done to help standardize the VFDs across the system. So with that, we have our senior engineer, Joel Blair, on here to give us the details and walk us through this. Joel, welcome.
Joel, you need to activate your mic. There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez, directors. As Patrick introduced this project, I would first like to start with a few slides here to introduce the background and our approach and the overall strategy for not only this product water pump VFD replacement, but also the overall program that we would like to start with this project. So if we start on page 33 of our agenda packet, I'd like to first start with an introduction of VFDs, variable frequency drives. So VFDs control motor speed by changing the delivered frequency. Basically, these are packaged electrical equipment units that we place between our electrical source and the motor that we are trying to control. Basically, they throttle the electricity that goes to the motor, and which in our case is typically water pumps throughout the district. They do this by taking your AC power, your alternating current, converting that to direct current, and then back to AC at the frequency that we want to drive our motors. The advantages of VFDs, again, with our application of pumps, VFDs allow fine speed control. That means instead of the pump just being on or off, we have control of the flow rates. We can adjust the flow rates within our system. Also, they protect our equipment. Instead of the pumps turning on and off abruptly, we can ramp up these motors and protect the equipment. They also protect the nearby electrical equipment with removal of voltage sag. For example, at least in my house, when I turn on the AC unit, the lights dim. With a VFD, that does not happen because instead of that abrupt power need, we have controlled ramping up of the power need. So we protect our equipment within the same facility. We also reduce our power consumption because VFDs only pull the electricity that we need. Again, they throttle the power that we need to our piece of equipment. So great savings there. Also, VFD technology has improved. We have now VFD units that are much smaller in footprint and cost less than they used to. Moving on to page 34 of the agenda packet. The district VFD needs. So here at the district, we have more than 120 existing VFDs. They mostly drive water pumps, as we mentioned. They are of varying ages. They are of varying types. As we install these during the multiple phases of expansion throughout the district. Half of these VFDs, 60 or more, are above 100 horsepower. We go up to typically 6, 7, 8. I think we may even have a 900 horsepower VFD here at the district. For these VFDs, these existing VFDs, we do have a PM program, a preventative maintenance program. We inspect, we test, and we repair the VFDs. However, this PM program, we cannot prolong life of obsolete equipment. That means the VFDs that are now obsolete, there is no way of really fixing them. We either have to salvage parts from other existing VFDs, or we have to replace the entire VFD itself. So we're having trouble fixing these. So what we need now is a VFD replacement program. And within this program, we need to prioritize replacement. We need to identify and replace critical and obsolete VFDs. And also, we would like to standardize the equipment. Standardizing the equipment allows economies, and it helps us with the maintenance. For example, spare parts. If a lot of our VFDs are now standard equipment, the spare parts can also be standard, and we can stock less parts that fit a lot of our VFDs at the district. Page 35. So as we begin this program, we've identified the system here at the district that has the highest priority VFD replacement, and that is the product water pump system, as Patrick mentioned, at the Edward C. Little facility. This consists of 8 product water pumps and 6 VFDs, and it's the very last step at our facility. It's critical because it is the one that distributes all our water to our distribution system, to our satellite facilities, and to all our customers, essentially. Here we can see a photo of an aerial photo of the system. We have pumps at Basin 2 on the left. We have more pumps over here at Basin 1 on the right. And the VFDs themselves that drive these pumps are housed within this west electrical room nearby. So to summarize, we have VFDs that are obsolete and need replacement. We have a PM program. However, we do need to begin a replacement program. And at this time, we have identified the highest priority here at the product water pump system. So on page 36, we have our approach for solving these issues. So first, we would like to replace the obsolete VFDs over at the product water pump system. We know which VFDs are obsolete. We've identified them. We just now need a design to replace them. Step 2 is the product water pump system itself a lot of it is 25 years old now. And it's not just the VFDs that are obsolete. We have aging pumps, aging equipment there. So we do need to do an evaluation of the entire product water pump system and determine what else we would need to replace or rehabilitate in the near future. So this is different than the first task, which is let's prepare this design to replace these identified VFDs. The third bullet here is, as I mentioned, we want to develop a standard VFD. We want to develop a tech memo that identifies maybe the family of equipment that we would like to use so that the VFD equipment throughout the district is standardized. And also the last bullet, we would like to develop an electrical submeter standard. So in addition to VFDs conserving power and saving us costs, we also want to collect more data. We want to improve the power monitoring here at the district so that we have real-time data of where the power is going, where we might have inefficiencies, and where we can improve our power usage overall. So we move to slide 37, page 37 of your packet. Those issues, this is how we've packaged it up into the RFP. That is the subject of this item. We have given the design firm three main tasks. Again, task 1 is critical VFD design. That is, let's get this design for the critical VFDs that need to be replaced soon. Task 2 is condition assessment, including hydraulic analysis and overall review of the product water pump system. This is not a design task. This is more of an evaluation and condition assessment task to identify what a full design would need to include in the future. And task 3 would be your technical memo outlining the VFD standard and the electrical submeter standard. So once we have task 1 complete, we would go into an award for a contractor. That is this grayed out box over here. To clarify, the blue items on this flow chart are the items that are included on this RFP, and the grayed out items are future tasks. So out of task 1, we would have a design to do the VFD replacement for the 2 obsolete VFDs. We would also ask the design firm to provide construction support. That is pre-construction, during construction, and post-construction support on that VFD replacement. Task 2 would be preparing a tech memo to develop the design criteria for the overall product water pump system. And task 2 coupled with task 3 gives us both the requirements for this full design and also our district standard would be developed by then. So then we would look to award in the future the full design of the product water pump system rehab or replacement. And then after that, we would award the full and pump replacement project. That would be the actual installation itself. And then in the future, after task 3, we would be able to roll out this VFD replacement program. We would have the standard, we could have multiple boards and prioritize the VFDs that need replacement and execute this project. At this time, I'd like to go back to the agenda packet on page 29 to review the results of our RFP. Just reading about a third of the way down the page, staff published an RFP for professional engineering services on the district's public procurement website, Megametrics. The RFP was posted for 30 days and notification was made to 486 firms with matching services codes. Carollo Engineers, Inc. and Tetra Tech submitted responsive proposals. Staff reviewed the proposals and conducted teleconference interviews with Tetra Tech and Carollo on April 27 and 28, respectively. Carollo received a higher score upon conclusion of the evaluation process. A summary of the proposals is provided below in Table A. Details of the evaluation are included in Attachment A. The Carollo team was able to explain their technical approach in a clear and concise manner. They highlighted their knowledge of the district's facilities and current trends in VFD technology, which is important because as we develop the standard, we want to know where the technology is going. We don't want to specify equipment that would have a chance of going obsolete rather quickly. On page 30 of the agenda packet, I'd like to read the recommendation for this item. The recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to enter an agreement with Carollo Engineers, Inc. for professional engineering design services for the Title II product water pumps and VFDs project in the amount of $215,952, plus 15% contingency in the amount of $32,393 for a total not to exceed amount of $248,345. I will take your questions at this time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Joe. Any questions from the committee?
None from me.
Okay, how about from other members of the board?
No questions. Thank you.
Okay. I've got a couple of questions. You mentioned that there's some obsolete units, etc. How many obsolete units do we have? Do we have like an inventory of what are the highest priorities? I know you indicated over at the product water pumps, those seem to be the highest priority right now. And do we have a whole schedule of
We have a top
replacement?
Yes, we have a top 10 of the most important VFD replacements throughout the district. 3 of them are within the product water pump system. Other systems that need replacement include the earlier RO systems at the Edward C. Little facility, also at the Torrance facility, and I believe the Carson facility.
And what's the time frame that you're anticipating having to replace these units?
That will be part of the evaluation conducted by the engineers, the design firm here. We want them to look at all our VFDs district-wide and prepare a standard, and the standard itself will recommend how soon VFD replacements will be needed.
All right, so they're going to basically come up with a priority of what needs to be replaced and an approximate time frame.
Yes, that will be part of the work.
Okay, and then they're going to do the full design for that too?
No, so the only design they will be doing as part of this RFP is the obsolete VFDs at the product water pump system.
Just those?
Just those.
When they develop the design criteria, will that design criteria be sufficient that district staff can go ahead and issue and prepare bid documents for replacing further units after those priority units are done?
Yes, so task 2, the condition assessment, is also purely just for the product water pump system at the Edward C. Little facility. So
I'm sorry, can you speak up there a little bit?
Task 2 of this RFP is the condition assessment just for the product water pump system. This RFP does not include evaluation of VFDs throughout the district, other than standardizing them and helping us prioritize which ones in general need to be replaced.
Would it be a good idea to consider prioritizing all of them at this point, since they're going to be doing some?
Yes, and we are currently doing that work with Suez. We are prioritizing, they conduct the PM program, the maintenance program. So they know which VFDs are currently causing us issues, may have leaks or may be overheating. So that would be work we would do with Suez along with this design firm.
Okay, but at the end of this design firm's contract, will they and Suez then come up with a list of all of the units to be replaced in approximate time frames?
Yes, maybe more of that work will be conducted by district staff and Suez, but yes, at the end of this project, we will have a clear-cut priority of which VFDs need to be replaced.
Okay.
And the time frame.
And when we're talking about district standards, are they going to come up with specifications, or can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by district standards?
It'll be a specification and also a design basis type document. We are asking them to identify specific brands, specific models of VFDs. Maybe not just one brand or one manufacturer, but maybe a family or several brands. And we are also looking for footprints and costs, information on these systems, so that when we do issue design packages for bid, then we will have this design basis document that the designer will have to follow. And we will have a good idea of costs and footprints and other requirements.
Do you feel comfortable that with that information, you will be able to issue design packages out for bids?
There may be some need to do a condition assessment depending on the units and the systems. But at this time, I do feel like we with Suez's help, we will be able to issue these bid packages.
Okay, thank you very much. One other question, going back to the main units, the 6 VFDs over at the for the recycled water pumps. That is a package that's going to be put together by Corolla then, or so that will be part of this
Yes,
current contract.
Yes,
And that's the only thing they're putting together, besides doing the assessment and putting together the design standards.
Yes, and helping us with construction support during that installation.
Okay. So the actual bids bid package will be assembled by Corolla, and you'll be coming back for recommendation and awarding the actual contract to some vendor to provide and install the VFDs.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's my questions for right now. Any other questions from the committee?
Just one thing, it's minor.
Go ahead.
It seems that this guy, Joel Blair, he's not identified on here. So we'll leave. Who is he?
Senior engineer. I see that.
Yeah, Joe is our senior engineer, Director Williams.
Well, it doesn't say that here on this document.
I know, we've been hiding that, Joel. We'll correct that before this goes to the board.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Joel.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Well, it could have been worse. His name could not have appeared at all.
Great presentation, Joel, by the way.
Great job.
Yes, thank you very much.
That's why I want you to be identified.
With that, are we ready to move this one forward?
I concur.
Okay, so we'll be moving that one forward, and that brings to a conclusion the action calendar. Next, we're moving on to the information calendar. And
That's correct. All right, go ahead. Ready?
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry to step on you there. Yeah, we have 3 items on the information calendar. And the first one was at the express request of Chairman Alvarez, who wanted us to provide a sort of an overview and some background on the seawater intrusion barrier, the West Coast Basin seawater intrusion barrier, and the roles of the various stakeholders. And staff, in fact, we got that request last week, a week from today, and they put together, I think, a really good presentation here for the committee's review. So I think we have a tag team on this particular item, the West Coast Seawater Intrusion Barrier Operations. We have our Manager of Operations, Uzi Daniel, and we have our Operations Engineer, Susanna Lee. I think, Uzi, you're going to lead it off and then on the presentation, and then Susanna will bring it home. So I thank you guys for putting this together at fairly short notice. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon, Director Alvarez, other directors and members of the public. I'm actually quite excited to talk to you about the barrier project. I have a long history of it on the regulatory side, which is quite complex and actually something to be very proud of as a district. And here's an outline. We'll go through that, a lot of the background real quick, some of the regulatory requirements that really dictate some of our limits and how we've moved forward historically. And then Susanna will take over and talk to us about some of the productions, maybe some of those constraints, and also all of the opportunities. A little bit of background, I think a lot of us are already aware, but the bottom line was there was an overdraft in the region, in the basin, and so they started to see seawater being pulled into the aquifers. And so a hydraulic barrier was created along the coastline to make sure to prevent that seawater from intruding. And a nice effort was done, actually very progressive on this board's, to this board's credit, was in the early 90s to go ahead and use recycled water. No reason to bring that imported water down from the mountains when we could be using our locally sourced water. And that's kind of how this journey began with recycled water to the barrier. And we know that in the 40s and 50s is when we really saw some of these changes with some very high chloride levels, some of which are still in the basin in these slugs. And we have a lot of partners that monitor that in addition to our own modeling. And so a pilot study was begun on this barrier to create that hydraulic mechanism to keep the seawater out and also to help recharge our aquifers. And you can see from this slide that we had the LA County Flood District, LA County Public Works Flood District in particular, who did help build that barrier to build the system itself. And WRD was formed also for the adjudicated water basin and to help manage that. And all of us are still partners today and stakeholders in trying to maintain the water levels and keep the seawater out from our aquifers. The barrier essentially is from LAX up to Palos Verdes, goes mostly into the 3 different aquifers we'll see here in this really nice graphic. And this is something that when we give tours, people, it's a very nice visual. You can kind of basically see the straw effect that pulled in the seawater and the different aquifers that we manage. The Silverado aquifer is really one of the main aquifers where most of the production occurs as well. So that is sometimes prioritized, and that's something that we watch carefully to protect and recharge for our aquifers. There are 3 barriers that are often discussed. For West Basin, we have the West Coast barrier. That is the barrier that we provide the recycled water for. The Dominguez Gap barrier, we provide the potable water, that is the connection, the MWD connection, as a wholesaler, we provide the potable water, but do not provide the recycled water for that. And then the Alamedas Gap barrier, the responsibility of Orange County. This is a nice graphic here that shows you just basically, again, we always have LAX as our landmark, that shows you all the different injection wells and a number of the monitoring wells we'll talk about a little bit later because those are very critical. We have 153 wells, although you might see some numbers that say 157, and that is because right now, as we speak, the County Department of Public Works is, through a grant of the state and with the assistance and partnership of West Basin, building new wells, rehabbing many of them mostly, and putting in a few new wells, in particular in the aquifers we mentioned earlier that are very important for production and that also may experience more breakthrough of salt water. The partners I keep discussing and the stakeholders are the LA County Department of Public Works, Water Replenishment District of Southern California, and of course, West Basin. Sometimes, I know when I began here, this was a little challenging for me to make the difference in this, and sometimes I still have to look and figure out all the moving pieces, which play a big, important role when we're educating our regulators. And the LA County Department of Public Works, they are the owner and operator of the barrier. That pipeline, all those wells, and most of the monitoring wells are owned and operated by the county. They are the ones that tell us how much recycled water they want on a daily, weekly basis. They may say, slow it down, we're ready to ramp up. They are the ones who dictate that to us. The the allocation, the budgeted amount, and in cooperation with WRD is decided what the aquifer, what the recharge rates should be, what we might need. And there's a constant back and flow partnership, although WRD does try to make an allocation and budget for the year in partnership with the county and with West Basin, so we too can budget for that. Finally, West Basin, yay, we are the producers of that water, and I always say the permitted producer of that advanced treated water. And I will go into why some of this nomenclature is actually quite important and called out differently within the regulations, statutes, and our permits. We do have meetings regularly, and we go over, again, where there's breakthrough water needs, we can adjust. And it's a very nice partnership. If we're not communicating on a weekly or monthly basis, we are having a more formal meeting where we're looking at the modeling, getting together to discuss that. The two limits that we often use in operation and compliance, a difference between the actual barrier permit limit, that is what the regulators permitted us to put in, which is 17.5 million gallons per day, and then the WRD agreement or the contract we have, the target, that works out to be about 15.2 million gallons per day of water. This is a little bit oversimplified, but I enjoy this. Again, this is something that we just had a young professionals tour recently, and they appreciate this. There's a lot of young professionals very interested in advanced water treatment, and this gives us an overview of from Hyperion through ozone, MF, RO, peroxide, UV, and then eventually out into the system. You can see where we have the mixing of some potable water and mostly the recycled water that goes into our West Coast barrier. This is an approval history I like to go over again, so we can kind of see the history of recycled water to the barrier. So when we first built the plant, again, progressive move, very, very notable move. We were allowed to put in up to 50%, but at the time our permit, the regulations allowed 50%, but our permit was 5 MGD. We wanted to put a little bit of water. The regulators often would say back then, there weren't a lot of people doing this, let's start slow. So 5 MGD. Quite soon thereafter, we got a new permit, the second barrier permit for 7.5 MGD. That was the allowable. At that time, regulation was 50-50. You could not put in more than 50% recycled water. And this was not necessarily the advanced treated water we have today. So about 2003, as the regs changed, we began our journey into being able to move towards 100% recycled water to the barrier. I will tell you, I came on board during that time. My background is water quality and compliance. And a lot of people would be amazed to hear that obtaining that permit took almost 3 years, regular work. And the reason is, and something that West Basin should be proud of and also understand, we are not a drinking water agency. We are not a wastewater agency per se. So the regulators often, and back then particularly, weren't sure which regulation to apply. So I will tell you quite honestly, they would often then apply both or the most stringent standard. It's what they had to work with until we'll see later other regulations came around. So at that time, permits were a lot of negotiating, a lot of demonstrations. We did so many valuable and wonderful studies that are used by other agencies related to how water behaves underground, how recycled water behaves, redox conditions, studies of contaminants. All of that had to occur. In 2006, we got a conditional approval that said we could move to 75% recycled water. And during that time, we had to collect a certain amount of data, establish an expert panel of outside folks to look at that data, look how we operate, bring us together, all these different studies they requested, and then it would be up to them to recommend whether or not they thought we were operating it properly and if we should move forward with more recycled water. The expert panel did have quite a list, but was quite proud of the work we did and gave us a conditional approval. And that's why by 2012, we began to expand again at the plant to be prepared to deliver 100% recycled water or a design capacity of 17.5 million gallons per day. I will bring up that we have a barrier permit, the same one that was issued in 2006, but the new groundwater recharge regulations came into play, and those required us to do quite a bit more extensive work. They required us to implement different kinds of reporting, monthly reporting, things called log reduction values, daily membrane integrity testing, a big litany of things. And really what they're preparing everyone for is direct potable reuse. We hear that a lot. The regulators behind the scenes will tell you they don't want to go to the public and say, we're ready to serve you recycled water in your drinking water. They're already thinking ahead and putting some of these more stringent standards into our IPR projects so that we have years of data to demonstrate that these technologies work. And that's why we saw that different layer. And it required quite a bit of effort on our part. Again, West Basin to be proud that we were able to bring our plant up to those standards, get the operators and the compliance staff to be able to report, and we have not had any violations. Finally, just this last year, they issued a new monitoring and reporting program, again, attached to our barrier permit. Those are some pretty tight standards. We've all heard about the PFOS, PFOA, other contaminants of concern. These are new monitoring reporting requirements and even some new analytical methods, which get a little complicated as well. And that's sort of when we're on the forefront of these new regulations, we have to recognize sometimes the technology hasn't caught up yet. Maybe they're requiring us to monitor for things that no lab is yet prepared or has methods developed. But by creating the statutes or the regulation, there would be an incentive to develop those. And so sometimes that's a little bit of a cat and mouse game as we get there. But that's where it's great that we all work together and all the stakeholders come together in the industry in general. This is my nice overview, I think, of just very simplified. The permit to operate the barrier is issued by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. However, they rely heavily on the Division of Drinking Water, which used to be a separate agency in itself. We've known it in the past of Department of Public Health, all sorts of different names. But basically, the Division of Drinking Water has to issue what's called a facts and finding and a letter of recommendation. They have to recommend your project and all the specifications. They're the ones that oversee the expert panels. They're the ones that okay everything, they approve it, and then they will send a letter of recommendation to the regional board to issue the permit, which has all the different conditions. I put these other agencies in here because it is important to recognize that there's when you build a big treatment plant, there are a lot of other agencies who are involved, and sometimes they depend on each other to hear what the other has approved or not approved before they will allow you to proceed. The basic regulation and statutes for the barrier are under Title 22. We hear that a lot, and there's sometimes a need to standardize nomenclature in our industry, ours, drinking water and wastewater industries. But Title 22 is what we often call our irrigation water, right? Title 22, but really it all falls under Title 22, as does drinking water. So under Title 22 are the surface versus subsurface, or what we always thought of as IPR, indirect potable reuse, which is our groundwater project. And under Title 22, as I mentioned earlier, in 2014 and 2015, the new groundwater recharge regs came into play that really started to set us up to be prepared for advanced water treatment, 100% going into our aquifers, and even for raw water augmentation, as is happening in San Diego. The recycled water policy is also important. That is a policy the state board reviews with another blue ribbon panel every 5 years. That policy can change depending on what blue ribbon the experts, the industries come up with. So when we see that, we have to sometimes implement new monitoring strategies. They might even require some different ways in which we report. That is contained in those policies. The nice thing about that is we are engaged with water reuse, even AWWA and some of the wastewater groups. They're very much a part of these policies, and as they get formed, they go to public comment, and that's a great opportunity for us to lend and get together as stakeholders like we often do and give them realistic perspectives on what is possible and what other agencies can be done. And it's a really good tool, but it's also something we have to comply with. Finally on here, NPDES, National Pollution and Discharge Elimination System. That's a very big permitting system. A lot of people don't realize, and this is a hurdle for drinking recycled water, is that recycled water, even if it's treated to the best degree of drinking water quality, it's considered a waste and a discharge. That's why to serve recycled water, you have to get an NPDES permit. Those are called waste discharge requirements. Many years ago, they added what you see there is the WRR, the water recycling requirements, to give a slight distinction to recycled water that is of a higher quality, that is of a drinking water quality, even though it is not technically drinking water. So our barrier permit is a dual WDR and WRR. In that is the monitoring and reporting programs that can change, are recently updated, and do really dictate what standards we have to meet or we have to shut our facility down. Finally, the brine permit. We probably couldn't serve recycled water if we didn't have the brine permit. We're dependent right now on Hyperion, on going out to their outfall, and that is just a regular WDR. That permit comes up every 5 years. It's open to negotiation. Often, we all know environmental standards rarely get looser. They tend to get tighter. Ocean standards are getting tighter. So those brine permits every 5 years really squeeze us, and they may one day trigger something that might require front-end treatment for us. And a lot of those requirements, again, they go through a public process, they go to a hearing, and we have a chance to lend our opinion, as do other stakeholders. As a note, the barrier permit doesn't technically have an expiration date. They just have all these other statutes and regulation that allow them to keep adding to that permit. Nearly finished with my section here. I get excited about this, so thank you. The monitoring wells are very important. We do have to monitor, and it's our responsibility. As of note, we are named on the permit. The county is also a co-permittee. However, West Basin per contract is responsible for all compliance. The county owns all the injection wells, and they own all but one of the monitoring wells that we utilize. And some of those we have to go out to monthly. I like to mention this to the board because I always like to bring up things that we may have to bring to your attention later. The well monitoring, drinking water wells are allowed to, as of now, discharge to storm drain. We are no longer allowed to discharge this aquifer, could be clean, pristine water, to the storm drains. So it requires a lot of different work and permits. We have to haul it away in trucks. We have been trying behind the scenes to find the time to work on some clever ways, but I like to bring to your attention the monitoring of the aquifers, and a lot of that is very important. It's a compliance element, and it's always quite a challenging part for us to manage. I'm now going to move into Susanna. We'll start to talk about production, and I figured the blend station is a good part for us to blend and transition over there as she describes how the water actually gets out into the system, and then some of our production numbers.
Thank you, Susie. And can you hear me okay?
I can, yes, and I'll advance the slides for you.
Okay. Well, so before we get into the whole production and how we have been doing in the various systems, like Uzi mentioned, that we would like to talk about parts of the barrier system that don't get to mention often, and it is the blending stations and the pipe system. So as the water leaves ECL on the left-hand side, you can see the purple pipe. It goes through several stops before it gets into our injection wells. So the water leaves ECL and it travels to what we call the barrier blend station. This barrier blend station, actually, we don't have any blending going on at that point. Water actually gets split into two pipelines. So 80% of the flow gets sent to the 24-inch line on the bottom that connected to the South Lake 45-inch connection vault. And the remaining 10 to 20% of the flow goes through the 10-inch steel pipeline that is connected to the North Lake 27-inch connection fault. So just want to point out that this blend station is owned and operated by the West Basin. So this is part of the recycled water assets that West Basin own. And all of the blending actions actually are being done at these two faults that are operate and owned by the county, where the imported water from Met is being brought in and connected and blend at those two locations. Right before the split, wait, can we go back? So right before the split of between the 27-inch and the 45-inch, there is the PRV where the county controls how much potable water is being injected into the barrier. So next slide, please. So here we're talking about the historical barrier injection flows. The red represents the total injection volume into the barrier. Echo. You hear your echo. Anyway, so as the graph depicts, this is the historical injection flow volume. Prior to recycled water program begins, you see that it's all of the imported water that injected into the barrier. We have West Basin began producing recycled water in 1995 as phase one. We begin seeing recycled water into the barrier system at 5 MGD, as Uzi mentioned, and by 1997, our capacity has increased to 7.5 MGD. But if you recall what Uzi mentioned, that all this time from phase one to all up till phase 4, which is about 2006, we were limited to 50% recycled water injection. So all this, we were trying to meet the 50% recycle rejection target. And then we came to 2006, and that's when we brought phase 4 construction, and we completed phase 4 construction, and we have UV, and we were up to 75% recycled water target. And 2013, that's when we have phase 5 construction completed, and we're up to 17.5 MGD at that point. Throughout, as you can see, that the recycled water percentage have increased as phase 5 was completed. And after phase 5 up to now, we're about 80 to 85% up to last year. So before I go into this year's injection, I would like to talk about the influent water quality, how that play into the challenges that we have in our system. So as you can see, this graph shows that our system was really designed on a separate set of specs. As engineer, we design our system based on design criteria. So if you can see here, the graph on the left, our system originally is designed based on 25 ppm of ammonia and 10 to 13 ppm of TSS. And I also look back at turbidity, we were at 4 NTU at that point. So throughout phase 1 to phase 2, the design criteria were really at a lot clean, quote unquote, cleaner water. So by the time phase 4, phase 3 and phase 4 comes around, ammonia is actually up to 40, 45 ppm, and our TSS is continue to increase. And this is due to mainly the conservation efforts that been successful throughout our county, and also the drought conditions that we see throughout the last decades. And how does that affect our operations? Because with higher ammonia, and that brings a more corrosive environment, some of these material of our systems are not necessarily designed to handle this corrosive environment. So we see a lot of brittleness the plastics and also gaskets. We end up have to adjust and adopt and change gasket material. And also our MF, original MF material were polypropylene that they were not designed to handle this highly fouling, biological fouling potential waters. So all these really play into the history of recycled water and how it really contributed to some of the challenges we have. And as phase 5 rolls along, we adopted and we recognize these challenges. So we changed the microfiltration material, membrane materials to PVDF, which can help us to handle better on these biological fouling. And also we install also ozone systems to try to help us to break down some of this fouling materials. So with that, then I'm going to go to the next slide. And here is the current barrier injection for FY 2021. As you can see, we are really averaging about 90 to 93% injection, meeting what the county authorized recycled water target is. So we're currently doing some maintenance work here, and that the county have a little bit issue with controlling how much potable water, but other than that, we are essentially meeting 100%, 100% the recycled water limit. So with that, I'm going to turn back to Uzi to wrap up of our discussion.
Sure. Thank you very much, Susanna. And I guess circle back, there's just one of our department, we often focus, and what we find important is the partnerships and our stakeholders. We obviously value customer service. We want to always be able to provide what we can. We also recognize that West Basin has partnerships where it depends on folks, the source control programs from other folks, or the demands from somebody else. As I mentioned, and everyone saw with enthusiasm, we are very heavily regulated. It is a challenge for us to meet those. We always do. We do it proudly. The West Basin badge is worn with honor for that. We are recognized by the regulators. They do trust us. When we've had any kind of issues come up, they immediately do honor what we say, because we are very honest. There's no reason for anything but to be straightforward. And I want to commend this agency, because I have never once felt pressure to do otherwise. And I think that's important to recognize, that we do promote that. The increased recycled water production over the years, we really have worked to increase that recycled water. We do try again to work with the county, reach out, see what we can do to help if there are mechanical, hydrological issues. We get together, as mentioned, with WRD and the county to see if there are some new techniques we could use, if not technology, to help promote more recycled water use. We're also engaged in R&R projects. The board supports a lot of those efforts. We see them every month, and those are projects where we really do focus on some of the challenges we have. Source water is a big one. When we get upsets, it really does affect things. Do you design for those few upsets? Do you make assumptions those will be more normal? Those kind of things are what we're often working with, and work as a team together with our partner Suez. We really are working to achieve the sustainable recycled water production listed in the contract. We're changing out some membranes actually right now, so that we can sustainably meet that number when requested. And I think that's important for the board, for our staff, for the county, and for WRD. So that is why we like to maximize that use. We do know it's important. This is going to be a drought year. I think the public really does support these efforts. We do recognize that what we do compliance-wise and operationally, in combination with the tours that we give, really all work as a synergy to show everyone that West Basin really still is a leader in recycled water, and that we have a very complex system. Most facilities are producing one type of quality water. We produce multiple. We're very proud of that, but that creates its own challenges. And I think people recognize that and always do give us praise in the end at what we are doing to try to promote more recycled water use and conservation in our Southern California region. And with that, I would love to answer, or Susanna or anyone, any questions of the board. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Uzi and Susanna. That was very nice presentation. Any questions from the committee member?
No questions. I'd just like to say that for many years I have been using the tagline, quality water equals quality of life. Thank you.
Amen.
Very good. Any other comments from other board members?
Just to say another excellent report. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. The barriers are very important. They're our largest customer, if you will, if I can use that terminology, in terms of the biggest user of recycled water. And it's a very high quality recycled water that we use at Uzi, as you mentioned. It's basically water that we could put into the drinking water system, but we're not quite there yet. And so now we're at the indirect portable reuse stage where we can put it in the ground and we can pump it out 1,000 feet away. So it's very important. You know, you talked primarily about the West Basin barrier. Are we right now selling some water for the Dominguez barrier?
So we do sell, for the Dominguez barrier, we do not sell any recycled water. That is sold, that is produced by the city sanitation and then sold through DWP. I'm not sure exactly the mechanism, but that recycled water is not controlled by us. However, the potable water is. There's a West Basin connection 37, I believe, and that, so we do sell to that barrier, but not recycled water.
Okay, so on that one, how the recycled water that's sold there is sold by the city of Los Angeles.
Correct.
But if it's if it's just portable water, imported water, then it's our customer.
Correct.
Correct.
And the reason that we don't get recycled water down there is just because of the distance to get there.
Well,
Yes.
it's plumbed from Terminal Island,
Okay.
from the city's plant. That's where they get the recycled water, which is not up at the same percentage of uptime as our barrier recycled water, not even close.
Okay. On the operation, you mentioned that it is a stakeholder driven and that West Basin works with the Water Replenishment District and LA County in operation of the barriers. So you guys meet apparently every 4 months?
Yes, approximately every 4 months for a larger meeting where we look at models. What's the salt water doing? Where can we make improvements? So those are the more formal meetings. We may occasionally have a brief meeting between two parties to talk about maybe a reduction or let's say a pipe break and how long it's going to last. So those are more informal, but the formal meetings are every 4 months approximately.
Is the barrier right now at its full capacity in terms of the amount of water that can be recharged through the barrier, or is the barrier have the capacity to recharge additional water?
And
Maybe,
Director, just go ahead.
Would you bring that slide back up, would you please, number 19?
Trying to go
Oh,
backwards.
it's 19, this one, yeah, 18. Thank you. Go ahead, Uzi, you can answer the director's question.
Oh, sure. So, well, this one a little unfairly, the county had a big pipe break actually, so they had to shut down the entire south leg. Are you asking, Director, just for clarification, hydraulically if it's taking all it can, or do you mean is West Basin sending all it can, or is the county? Could you possibly just clarification on that?
It'll be a little bit of all of those. Basically, my question is, I understand right now there's a break and it can only take so much water until they repair that. I'm not talking about existing conditions. I'm talking overall, the barrier has X capacity. And traditionally, we put in about 17,000 acre feet of water in the barrier. Okay, so do you guys know if that's the ultimate capacity of the barrier or if additional water can be put in the barrier? The overall hydraulic capacity of the barrier would be the question.
And I did see, and I don't know if it's appropriate, but I did see that Everett was on our call earlier. I don't know if we would want to hear from him as far as what the water master might, for adjudicated and pumping, what they might want to answer to that question. We are always trying to maximize, learn each year, what is the amount that is possible? Do we have the capacity to produce the recycled water? Lately, we've had the ability to produce whatever is requested of us. Whether or not it could take more, like for example, storage, that question might be better answered by those who are managing the aquifers and the whole basin.
Okay.
And Director Alvarez, if I may add to that, what WRD does, they look at a number of factors in determining how much they want us to send, whether it's potable or recycled water, how much they would want to inject into the ground. Particularly, they look at the groundwater levels. That has a big factor in them determining, okay, this year we need this much acre feet to put into the ground. And it varies based on the factors that they look at, the hydrological conditions and the water table. And so they would, as you know, they would send a request of this is how many acre feet per year we would like to have into the system.
Okay.
In addition to that, the county, which operates and owns the system, they have their constraints within their system. So as Uzi mentioned, they're making improvements, they're adding new wells, but the system is a pretty old system, and there are certain segments of the system that need replacement and repair. So there, our understanding from the county is that there's certain constraints with the system itself, and they're trying to mitigate that with the improvement projects that they are implementing. So our role as West Basin is to kind of understand what WRD is requesting, but also deal with the constraints that the county will have, and then give the maximum recycled water amount that the county allows us to send their way.
Okay, thank you. You know, one of the issues is we obviously want to maximize the use of recycled water and avoid the use of imported water, especially in a year like this where we're in a drought. And permit-wise, we're permitted to put 100% recycled water into the barrier. And when we're talking recycled water here, we're not talking about just recycled water that's used for irrigation purposes, etc. We're talking about very high quality water that basically we could drink. But we continuously run up against this issue that the county insists on putting in a certain amount of imported water. Do you guys understand why that is? And can you explain that?
So I can give you some of the history, and others may want to chime in, but I can tell you from my compliance side here, where I started, where we were interested always in, because we have to report the percentage that was happening. the percentage and how it's represented, that we didn't exceed those limits in our permit. And I know there was a period where there literally was almost mechanically issues. So for example, the county works Monday through Thursday. They often give us a window of 6 hours if we want to make changes, preferably. They understand emergencies, but this is their prime working time because they have to physically make changes. So there used to be where they don't have as good a signal, so they always wanted to have that, we'll call it potable water that's coming in, so that they could guarantee a certain amount from a valve that could fluctuate without them having to, after hours, make adjustments. I'll put it that way. So there was that portion of it that I would call, it's the mechanical maintenance side that they would often refer to. They have stated, and I did talk to the county not too long ago, that they actually, the way they put it is that they would never physically shut the valve of potable water, imported water, never shut the imported water valve, but that if we got to a point where we could at some point put enough recycled water in there based on pressure, it would limit the amount. But it's really about the pressure, what the barrier is taking at the time. And I've actually requested, and once we get this, Director, it might be nice to share, maybe invite the county, but we've requested actually maybe understanding better the hydraulics, how the barrier works, when different wells are on. I will tell you, when they had their budget crunch, they actually shut some of their wells off. They didn't have the budget to go maintain them. That's where we saw breakthrough. So I think there's a lot of things in play, but we are requesting to maybe get a better understanding of, so we could all partner, what are the actual mechanics that sometimes limit that and require them to take or just keep that potable water valve open and fluctuating as it does.
All right, so let's assume that the imported water valve is turned off. Can we deliver the amount of water that we need to deliver at all the times, or are we needing to work a little bit more on our treatment processes because we can't deliver that water?
So the current amount requested, we are able to meet, and I would say sustainably meet. If they were to request more than about 15 and a half, we would start to get in an area where we need to think about things like adding an RO, waiting for the new MF that's going to come on board, maybe a cartridge filter. The thing we built, the permit, another thing about the permits is interesting, is you have to get your permit to the design. The regulators assume if for 1 second you were at that rate, that's what you permit to. But we don't really always build in the redundancy. So we'd have to build in a little redundancy. And one of the things I maybe didn't emphasize as much, but the source control, any upset always sets us back if we don't have that redundancy. So to answer your question, we currently could meet that, and we believe that at the current projections and next year's budgeted amount, we believe that we could sustain the amount requested in recycled water. If we get to where we're requested to produce more, I realize the WRD agreement doesn't go above 15.2, but let's say we did go above that, we would need to wait for some of those improvements and build more redundancy in. And that gets back to the question, do you build large capital for some upsets, or if they're becoming more frequent, should we just count that as the new normal? And those are the kind of decisions we often bring to the board and that we're working on.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. On that issue, theoretically, we have the capacity right now to deliver 100% recycled water to the barrier at that 15.2 MGD rate.
That's correct.
WRD, if you look at at least what they say and what they budget for 100% recycled water, even though they understand that they don't get it all the time. In talking to WRD, they're of the opinion that they would like to get 100% recycled water in the barrier at all the time, but that this is a problem, not just with the West Coast barrier, but Dominguez and Alameda's, where they're the water provider out of the Vanderlands plant. So is this something we can maybe work a little bit closer with the county to get them to be more comfortable with not having that valve open that has imported water constantly available, and that they're just relying 100% on recycled water? Because from a permitting point of view and a water quality point of view, there's no reason why not.
That's correct.
We have Director Alvarez, we have approached the county on multiple occasions to make that happen. But as you can see, even with closing the gap on the potable here, the county's requests that are coming in are considerably lower than what WRD is expecting. So the system constraints from the county and their requests to West Basin of what the maximum amount of recycled water ought to be going to their blending facilities are still less than WRD's annual request, if you're comparing averages. So yes, while we work with the county to try to limit this sliver of imported water going to the system for operability purposes or hydraulic type of purposes that they are leaving in there, and we'd like to address those with them, there's still the overall system constraints that we would like to kind of go beyond that and try to meet WRD's annual requests, because we believe we sustainably can provide that amount.
Okay, so going back to then these meetings every 4 months, when it's you guys, the county, and WRD.
Correct.
So at those meetings, and maybe there's right now it's 3 parties, and all stakeholders all have a role. But in terms of the operations, at the end of the day, we're at the mercy of LA County Public Works, if I understand it correctly. So what would it take to move us beyond that, where we have and when I say we, it would be West Basin, WRD, would have a greater role, because it would behoove all of us to be at 100% recycled water all the time. We have the capacity, at least the 12 MGD, to deliver that consistently, and no real need to have a valve open for imported water all the time in the background. Anyways, food for thought, that maybe that's something we want to do, or we might want to think about doing. And I think we have a really good opportunity right now to point out to the county that the use of any imported water is really detrimental from a greater good point of view when we're in a very serious drought. And we have the capacity to deliver 100% recycled water. I do think that there is, from everything that I've understand and believe, that there is a desire on the part of the replenishment district and others to see more replenishment through the barriers. So that, but we have the capacity right now. We're not using the 15.2 MGD that we have currently available.
Correct. Because they're not asking for it. The WRD on the one hand would like that, but like we're sort of repeating ourselves here, the limit is that red line is the top limit, but the purple line is what the county is requesting. But I think, and there is a lot of dialogue, has been a lot of dialogue, Director Alvarez, on this over the past several years. And even though this is a 95% clip on this time frame here of recycled water to potable again being put in by the county, which on valves that they control. But there's a couple of takeaways here. We can revisit the dialogue, particularly in the drought scenario, to have zero. I think it's not quite semantics, but we'd like 100% recycled water. But more importantly, if we can deliver up to 15 or higher, we'd like to have zero potable water going in there, which is controlled by another entity. So we can definitely continue that dialogue and see if we can get a better explanation of why they're putting in any, which I agree they shouldn't be putting in any. If you look at back in slide 16, 2 two slides before this. I don't know who's controlling the slides. For times when we're allowed to put in whatever the limit is, the vast majority of the time we're meeting the standard, but it's been 20 MGD before recycled water ever came into the picture in 1987. That's what the barrier was taking. It's taken a lot less now over the years. It's trended down to 15, so it's not, they're not requiring us to give them anymore, but when they ask, we give it to them. We're almost at 100%. So it's one of those things. We'll definitely revisit the dialogue part of it to see if we can get on the same page. But the system, I'll close on this, and you know this, Director Alvarez, it needs a huge injection of capital. That's for sure. In terms of those wells that were put in the 60s, some of them are in better shape than others, but I know that in talking to the folks over there, and Mark, if you were talking to Dennis Lafferty last week and the week before, that's a constant dialogue we have. We're waiting to get monies to address the infrastructure and the asset management needs of this system. But we'll continue to work on it.
Well, thank you for pointing that out, because they do have more capacity at the barrier than they're currently taking advantage of. And if you do go back quite a bit, but in the historical period, we saw more water being put in through the barrier. And at that time, there was also consequently a lot more pumping happening out of the basin. Pumping in the basin's gone from about 50,000 acre feet a year to 25,000 acre feet a year. So if we want to increase reliance on groundwater, we would need to put in more recycled water in the barrier. And then it becomes an issue of how much can we get to. And I'm all for doing what we need to do to increase that and serving recycled water that way.
Yeah, I think you could
have a quality issue.
Go ahead.
Maybe this is a question for Susanna. You pointed out about the influence at the Ed Little plant in terms of what's coming out of Hyperion that we have to deal with. So how much of an issue is this in terms of constraints in our production, and are we thinking that we really may need to rethink how we deal with at least the tertiary treatment?
I mean, I believe that with more stable water, then that would definitely decrease the number of fouling events that the MF system would see. Because anytime we have those upsets, then that means we have fouling event. The MF would be foul, and that puts a constraint, because especially currently, the MF systems are being shared with the Chevron, because phase 2 and 3 are not, for the most part, are not operable. And so that MF system, phase 4 and 5, really were designed for handling the barrier system, are now being shared with Chevron. So during those fouling events, we are now taking away some of these capacity, but also we have to maintain that demand for the Chevron. So those are the constraints that we are working against us.
Dr. Alvarez, we have one of the projects that we're proposing in next year's capital budget is the starting to look into the replacement of phase 2 and phase 3 MF systems to address that issue.
Okay, so we're going to look at that, but we're going to have to deal with the fact that, one, we have a highly variable influent, and two, the quality of that influent, just because of the reduction in water consumption, therefore the reduction in wastewater flows, we're seeing higher strength coming in, which was not what the plant was originally designed for.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so at some point we do, and you mentioned that we're going to be looking at redoing some of that. And it may behoove us then at that point to really think about, what is the capacity that we ultimately have to want to be at, and what is our reliable sources of supply for the plant.
Correct.
Right, and just to kind of button this point up, Dr. Alvarez, this influent water quality and the maintenance is associated with it, and the upsets or putting systems down, we have a certain capacity, right? And if we go full blast, every pump, every membrane that we have, if we go just full blast, which is not sustainable, you have to put some systems down for maintenance services and for especially for plant upsets. But if we had everything full blast, we can actually achieve the 17.5 MGD. But it's not sustainable because there's certain type of utilization that's associated with that. So furthermore, in addition to that, in addition to the 90% say utilization of such equipment, the water quality, over time would bring that down a little bit. And the upside certainly would bring that down. So you're going from 90% utilization, 95% utilization. These type of water quality events would bring those down, and then that ultimately impacts the overall acre feet per year that goes to the barrier system.
Okay, thank you. So on that, then we do need to think about that. But right now at the 15.2 MGD, we have the capacity. You're not running full out all the time.
Correct.
The
The 15.2 we can do sustainable.
Okay. So when we revisit, as you mentioned, the improvements that are needed over at the Little plant, all of that will be reviewed and we'll have further discussions with that.
Correct.
What's the time frame you mentioned? Is this coming fiscal year we're going to start that process?
Next fiscal, it's included in next fiscal year's budget is when we're going to start it. Yeah.
Okay, and that's just from a study and evaluation point of view.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that will behoove us to expand in that area and look at that a little bit closer. Okay, that kind of answers all my questions, and I just realized that we went for a really long time again, so I apologize, and I'm going to have to get going myself. Director Williams, do you have any other questions or any other directors?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that report. We've got two other reports right now that would be in the information calendar. I don't know if we have a lot of time. I've got about 5 minutes left.
You
Director
have
Williams.
5 more than I have.
Oh. Okay. So on these, would it be okay if we just accept the reports and not have a formal presentation?
Yeah, it would, but it's not a pattern I'd like to continue because these reports are important for informing the board, not just filing them away. But the most of the time today was eaten up with the very informative and important barrier presentation by Uzi and the staff. So, but yeah, it's okay to receive and file them. But I think going forward, it would be good to at least pick out certain items, maybe not the whole report, but a couple of projects on the capital to feature and some of the highlights on the operation. But I think I've used up most of your 5 minutes. But
I agree, and I actually read them, and both reports are very important. There's a lot of information on the CIP report that's presented very succinctly, and it's at least very valuable to me, and I think it's very valuable to all of the other board members.
yeah, they're historically used to having it presented, and as the public are by the staff, and it helps with the Q&A and all of that in an ideal situation if there's no time constraints.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe next month we'll have less presentations and be able to get to those information items a little bit and with a little bit more time. With that, if there's no closed session and any director's comments?
Great reports.
Okay. Thank you very much. Those were very good reports. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much.